At the company town hall, my VP said over the microphone, "If everyone worked as hard as you, we'd be bankrupt in a week." The room laughed as he added, "Know your place, you're replaceable." I just nodded and said, "Thank you for making that clear." Last Friday he opened a letter that turned his world upside down. "I've worked at Carrington Logistics in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania for just over 9 years. I started as a dock scheduler, eventually moved into operations planning, and for the last 3 years, I'd been working as a senior analyst for the supply chain division. The job itself wasn't flashy, mostly numbers, forecasting, bottlenecks, reports. I wasn't loud about what I did. I wasn't the guy raising my hand in meetings to be seen. I just did my work, consistently, quietly, and with a high level of accuracy. People knew me. People depended on my reports. Not because I was some kind of genius, I'm not, but because I made sure things were right before I spoke up. That made me the exact opposite of our new VP, Martin Delaney. Martin came in about a year and a half ago. He was flashy, arrogant, and clearly one of those guys who used buzzwords to cover up the fact that he didn't understand most of what he was saying. He walked around quoting productivity stats, throwing around terms like synergize, verticals, and pivot efficiency. The kind of guy who thought dressing down on Fridays meant wearing dark jeans with a blazer and no tie. But worse than that, he made it known that he didn't like people who didn't suck up to him. And I didn't. He didn't like that. I was too quiet, too data-driven. I corrected him once in a budget planning meeting, not rudely, just told him the metric he cited had a 14% error rate and I had the report to back it up. That's all it took. From then on, I was on his radar. Small things at first. He stopped copying me on key emails. He began shifting morning planning calls to times that conflicted with my assignments. He'd make snide comments like, "Maybe if we had real analysts," or, "These reports look like they were slapped together by someone half asleep." Never used my name. Never directly blamed me. But I knew. Then came the town hall. It was late April. Every quarter we'd gather in the big conference space on the first floor. Around 200 employees. Bagels, coffee, the usual corporate stuff. This time, Martin decided to do a Q&A session. People asked questions about layoffs, about automation, about how AI was affecting job security. Someone asked how individual contributors could stay valuable. And that's when he said it. "If everyone worked as hard as Ethan," he used my name that time, "we'd be bankrupt in a week." People laughed. I felt my face get hot. He wasn't done. "Know your place," he said into the mic, "you're replaceable." The room got awkward quiet. Some chuckles. Some people looked at me. I just nodded, smiled a little and said, "Thank you for making that clear." Then I walked out. I didn't go back in. I didn't even go back to my desk. I left the building and sat in my car for a full hour. And when I got home that night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't break anything. I opened my laptop and started building a plan. You don't spend 9 years in supply chain analytics without knowing how to track patterns, collect data quietly, and build systems that people overlook. I didn't plan to hurt anyone. At first, all I wanted was to leave. With dignity. But I also wanted him to be held accountable for what he said. So I started with email. I created a new folder in my personal Gmail, labeled it Backup Evidence. Over the next few months, I collected everything I could, emails forwarded from coworkers, messages he accidentally CC'd me on, even screenshots of Slack messages where he mocked staff, used condescending language, and in one case, referred to a junior project manager as a diversity hire who couldn't manage a lemonade stand. Then I started reaching out, carefully, to other people who'd been targeted. There were more than I thought. A woman in HR who resigned last year told me over coffee that Martin pressured her to change internal investigation results. A warehouse manager in Columbus said he threatened to blacklist him if he didn't get with the new program. I asked if they'd be willing to give statements. Most said yes. Then I reached out to my old professor from Carnegie Mellon, who now worked as an HR consultant and employment lawyer. I paid her out of pocket for 2 one-hour consultations. She helped me understand how to structure everything, how to file an anonymous ethics complaint that would trigger a legal obligation to investigate. I filed it. 3 weeks later, the internal audit team sent out a company-wide survey about leadership culture. Martin tried to spin it as routine. Said all companies did these things. But he looked nervous. Then I got an email from the audit team, not internal, external. The company had hired an outside firm to handle the investigation. That's when I knew it was serious. But Martin wasn't stupid. He saw the walls closing in. And he retaliated. He took me off all major projects. Told my manager I was underperforming. Gave me a formal warning for insubordination because I questioned one of his last-minute data requests, which he wanted in 4 hours even though it normally took 2 days. I went to HR. They told me they'd look into it. They didn't. So I did something that still makes my stomach churn. I pretended to break down. I walked into my manager's office and said I needed to take stress leave. I had a therapist, real one, and I got the paperwork filled out. Took 2 weeks off. Used every day to document everything, finalize my dossier, and prepare the next move. The final piece was a whistleblower letter. I wrote it simply, factually, without emotion. Attached every document, every quote, every statement. Labeled each file clearly. I submitted it to the board of directors, using the formal reporting process in our code of conduct. And then I waited. Last Friday I got a text from a friend in legal. He opened it. I didn't reply, but I knew what he meant. Martin got the letter. He got the whole damn thing. My friend told me he turned pale, stormed out of the office, and didn't come back all day. On Monday, the company put out a notice that Martin was on administrative leave pending an internal matter. Nobody believed it was health-related. By Tuesday, his office was cleared out. No goodbye email. No announcement. Just gone. And me? I'm still here. For now. When Martin vanished from the office, it felt like a quiet shift in the air, like when a storm passes, but you know another one's coming. People whispered. My inbox, which had been dead for weeks, started filling up again. Some coworkers were checking in, others sent subtle thank you notes without saying what for. I didn't respond to any of them. I wasn't ready to talk, because the real storm hit 4 days later. I was called into a meeting with HR and legal. There were 2 people I'd never met before, outside investigators from the firm the company hired. They sat me down in a glass room, shut the blinds, and said, "This is confidential, but we need to verify your submission." They had everything. They asked me to walk them through it. Every email, every report, every story. It took 3 hours. I didn't hold back. I told them about the comments, the retaliation, the warnings. I showed them the documents again, and this time, I included the ones that proved I'd been deliberately left off key projects. I even had a spreadsheet I'd made for myself, showing how my name disappeared from regular meetings the moment I challenged Martin publicly. At the end, one of the lawyers looked at me and said, "You did your homework." I just nodded. That should have been it. But nothing at Carrington is that simple. The next week, I got a calendar invite. Meeting with Chief Operations Officer, Thursday at 9 a.m. Go. That had never happened before. I showed up early, nervous. Sat outside the executive suite for 10 minutes before her assistant waved me in. The COO, Valerie Denton, was in her late 50s, sharp suit, sharp eyes, no small talk. "I want to thank you," she said as I sat down. "You brought something to our attention that should have been caught a long time ago." Then she leaned back and crossed her arms. "But this isn't just about Martin. And you need to know that." She slid a file across the table. Inside were printed emails, not just from Martin but from other execs. Some of the worst ones I'd submitted. "There are at least 3 other senior leaders involved in this kind of behavior," she said. "You were the start. But this is bigger now. And it's going to get worse before it gets better." That's when I realized something. I hadn't just gone after one man. I'd kicked open a door that others had been nailing shut for years. She asked if I'd be willing to be interviewed further. I said yes. But I walked out of that room with a knot in my gut. Because I knew people were going to start blaming me. 2 days later, my manager, Jeff, called me into his office. He closed the door, sat down, and stared at me. "I know what you did," he said. I didn't respond. "You think this helps the team? We're down a VP, and now there's a freeze on 3 major contracts because of this investigation. You realize how many people might lose their jobs because of your little whistleblower stunt?" I just stared at him. "I followed the reporting policy. If that causes problems, maybe the problems were already there." He smirked. "Don't act like a hero, Ethan. People don't like rats." That word, rat, hit me harder than I expected. It stayed with me all day. By Monday, the whispers had started. Someone had leaked that the investigation started because of a staff complaint. I didn't know who leaked it. Maybe Martin himself. Maybe Jeff. Either way, people were looking at me differently. No more thank you emails. Now it was cold shoulders. Pauses in conversation when I walked by. Lunch invites stopped coming. Slack messages dried up. I was the guy who took down the VP, and possibly more to come. The company put out a notice that there would be more leadership changes, in alignment with updated corporate values. Another executive resigned the following week. Then another. Meanwhile, I got a message from a blocked number on my personal phone. You're screwing with people's lives. Hope you're proud. I blocked the number, but the feeling stuck. That Friday, I was called into yet another meeting. This time with HR, legal, and someone from security. They said they had reason to believe Martin had taken confidential files when he left. What kind of files? I asked. They hesitated. Files that included performance reviews, sensitive employee data, and emails. Some of them between you and others. They believed he'd accessed the company's servers through a backdoor account that hadn't been disabled, and he might be planning to leak them. Suddenly, my stomach dropped, because I remembered something. One of the emails I'd sent to the HR consultant, my old professor, had included wording that, out of context, could look very, very bad. I'd said, "I'll make sure this guy gets what's coming to him." It wasn't a threat. It was venting. But in the wrong hands? Could be twisted. HR asked me to sign a form acknowledging I had cooperated fully and truthfully. They said I had nothing to worry about. I wasn't so sure. That night, I got another anonymous message. Email this time. It just said, "You think you're safe?" The company issued a restraining order against Martin. I wasn't told the details, but someone from IT told me his login credentials were used from a hotel in West Virginia, and they traced the IP. He was trying to access his own email and someone else's, possibly mine. The company quietly moved to a new internal platform. Everyone had to reset passwords. The whole company was on edge. And me? I was burning out. Even though I did the right thing, I was becoming a ghost in my own office. People wouldn't talk to me directly anymore. I overheard a manager say I was radioactive. A friend from finance said some people thought I was trying to make a name for myself by exposing people. Nobody cared that I hadn't asked for credit or attention. I just didn't want to be humiliated anymore. But now, I was isolated. And worse, I started to wonder if I'd made everything worse for myself. Then something happened I didn't expect. A woman named Priya from the Dallas office emailed me. Subject, "Thank you." She'd heard what happened. Said Martin had screamed at her on a conference call months earlier, reduced her to tears, then had HR bury the complaint. She'd been too afraid to come forward. But after she saw the changes happening, she filed her report. And 2 others followed. One from the Atlanta warehouse. One from the Detroit operations center. They'd all been bullied. They were all silenced. And now they were speaking up. One of them used a phrase that stopped me cold. "You gave us permission to fight back." But things at HQ were falling apart. I overheard 2 directors arguing about layoffs. Budgets were frozen. A key client backed out of a 5-year contract. The scandal was getting too big. That's when I realized the company was collapsing in slow motion. And people still blamed me. Even the people I thought were my allies. Even Jeff, who once called me the most reliable guy in the department, now refused to speak to me directly. And Martin? He wasn't done either. A new LinkedIn profile popped up with his name. No photo. No job title. But the headline said, "The truth always comes out." A few of my contacts were tagged. Then a fake Twitter account started posting screenshots of emails, twisted out of context. Most were harmless, but a few made some managers look very, very bad. HR launched a second investigation, this time into the leak itself. And I knew Martin had nothing left to lose. But I wasn't done either. And I had one more card left to play. I held on to that last card for almost 2 months. I didn't want to use it unless I had no other choice. Then 3 things happened in 1 week. First, Jeff, my manager, scheduled a one-on-one with me out of nowhere. I thought maybe he wanted to clear the air. Instead, he handed me a written warning. Performance issues, it said. Lack of team collaboration. Resistance to leadership. I stared at it numb. "You're serious?" I asked. He wouldn't look at me. "I'm just doing what I was told." "Ethan, you're too much of a risk now. It's coming from above me." That was Tuesday. On Wednesday, a new VP, some guy from a company in Cleveland, was hired to rebuild the leadership team. He called a staff meeting and made a speech about restoring trust and professionalism. Never said a word about the investigation or what really happened. Just a clean PR sweep. Then Thursday came, and I got a letter. Not from Carrington. From an attorney. Martin's attorney. He was suing me for defamation. I felt like I'd been hit with a brick. The letter was full of legal nonsense, but the message was clear. Martin was blaming me for his downfall. His lawyers were claiming I deliberately misrepresented facts to damage his reputation and career. I called my lawyer, the same woman I'd been working with quietly since this started. She sighed when I read the letter. This is a desperation move, she said. He's trying to scare you into silence or a settlement. You followed every channel the right way. He knows he's screwed. But can he really sue me? Anyone can sue anyone. But he's going to wish he hadn't. That was it. That was the moment I knew I had to go all in. So I pulled out my last card. Remember that backup evidence folder I kept? There was one document I never submitted. A recording. Back in February, months before the town hall, I had a private meeting with Martin where he tried to pressure me into changing a quarterly report. The report showed a 7.2% cost overrun on a transportation contract that his team had negotiated. He didn't want that to hit the executive review. He told me to revise the numbers. Make it 2%, he said. Round some numbers. Move some things around. I recorded that meeting. On my phone. Legal in Pennsylvania, since we're a one-party consent state. At the time I saved it but never used it. But now, it was time. My lawyer helped me draft a response to the lawsuit. Attached was the audio recording, plus a signed statement from another employee who had been asked to massage numbers the previous year. The lawsuit was dropped within 48 hours. But that wasn't the end. Because I did something else with that recording. I sent it, anonymously, to a local business reporter who'd been sniffing around the Carrington story for months. The story dropped the following week. VP pressured staff to falsify financial reports. Sources say it went viral. Not nationally, but big enough that it hit all the local business circles. LinkedIn lit up. Carrington's name was everywhere, in the worst way. The board responded by firing 2 more senior managers. They brought in another consulting firm. Several directors resigned. And Martin? His wife filed for divorce 2 weeks after the article went live. A friend who used to work with her said she was humiliated, said she didn't know what kind of man he really was. Apparently, she'd been the breadwinner for years, and when Martin lost the Carrington job, everything in their house collapsed. They had one son, 16 years old, who posted on social media that week, "Guess Dad wasn't the hero he made himself out to be." Yeah, got that ugly. Back at Carrington, I was offered a retention bonus to stay and help transition the analytics team. I turned it down. I took a job with a smaller firm in Erie, less money, fewer people, way less drama. On my last day, I packed up my things quietly. No speeches. No cake. No cards. I walked out the door with a backpack and a folder. And I never looked back. People sometimes ask if I regret any of it. I do. I regret not speaking up earlier. I regret thinking that working hard and keeping my head down was enough to protect me. It wasn't. But I don't regret the revenge. He humiliated me in front of 200 people. He said I was replaceable. And in the end, he was the one who got erased, not me.